Hello, everybody. This is Cameron Honesty. I'm the host of the Voice of College Football Network's Texas A&M Live. I am joined today by Gig'em 24/7 beat writer Carter Carrolls. He's also a part of our Texas A&M writing community, obviously, which is ever growing. And, it's kind of a tight knit because we're all kind of covering the same thing every day. I am not joined today by my usual co-host, Will Stone, who's dealing with some personal issues. But we will get the show off to a great start. First, by saying happy tax day to everybody, which for us sports writers is not a good day. And I can honestly say that with sadness inside me. But hey, tomorrow's a new day, and I won't have to worry about that for another year. Anyways, we have a lot on the docket today. It's going to start with new head basketball coach Bucky McMillan, who has been hard at work over the past, I'd say, couple of weeks, trying to land players from the transfer portal, obviously building a roster that is in dire shape after Buzz Williams left for Maryland. He obviously took starters, forwards Farrell Payne and Solomon Washington with him, two of the promising redshirt freshmen, Andre Mills, and I believe it's George Turkson Jr., who also followed him to Maryland. So basically, this is a rebuild completely to the point where he, does get a clean slate, which is good for any coach because you want to get players that fit your system perfectly. Made a little bit of a splash on Saturday afternoon, landing former North Alabama guard Jakari Lane, who's one of the better guards in the country, in my opinion. I did have a chance to watch him some of the season. I'm kind of a basketball junkie, so I do get to see some of these smaller school guys kind of ball out, especially when they're playing bigger opponents. I believe it was against Auburn that I saw him play. Average about 17, I think, 0.2 points per game, shot 40% from the field and from three. He is a guy who's going to be an immediate starter. And after that, I think it was Sunday afternoon during the Masters, all of us were obviously focused on Roy McIlroy's comeback. But Zach Clements, a forward from Kansas, who is somebody who I don't think a lot of fans knew who he was. I think most of us did decent reporting in saying that he's a San Antonio native. He was a 4-star top 100 rated, top 100 or top 50. I kind of forget, but rated player. And he's just been on the bench for Kansas for a while. I don't know if it was a system problem or a fit with Bill Belichick or basically just being behind so much talent. But, he's going into a very crucial next 2 weeks where not only do you only have, I believe it's 4 players on the roster now, but you have to start filling starting positions and then getting enough depth to actually have a team to field going into next season. We've heard some things this week about, obviously, a number of players he's reached out to. I believe the latest was Missouri transfer Peyton Marshall, who is a 7-foot, 300-pound big man who obviously is going to get attention from a lot of big programs just because of his potential. But to open the question to you, Carter, is have you really heard anything else in terms of them making significant progress with, a handful of guys at either guard or forward going into the next 2 weeks?
I've been a little bit, admittedly, in football mode this week, so I haven't been totally with the spring game coming up. But I do know that Josh Holloway, who's the former sixth man of the year in his conference from Sanford, he's one to watch. He visited over the weekend. We thought maybe he'd be one to pop here soon. We'll see on that. I know I'm going to butcher his name, but the SMU center, Johan Trory.
Trory, I believe. I know Johan. I can pronounce that one.
Yes, I know he's somebody that's kind of been in the mix, but this is a growing list. I mean, they really had to start with a blank slate, and I don't think Bucky McMillan has slept very much because you're talking about not just getting starters, but getting bench guys, getting role guys, getting depth pieces. You're really having to come through and say, okay, and then how much eligibility should we be looking for each spot? Like ideally you'd love to have a guy for 2 or 3 years, but you don't want to get a bunch of depth pieces that are going to take away scholarship spots for 3 whole years. So it's kind of a balancing act of doing that. And also, the transfer portal didn't open or open, more than a week before he took the job. So he was put in a severe disadvantage, not just because he came in late, not just because you had the house settlement, and people trying to kind of get signed and land at places and get into deals before last Monday, but also as guys keep getting off the table, who else is going to enter, and what are you going to have to work with? It's kind of hard to know all of that exactly. So you're going to have to make really quick decisions, and you're having to do like 5 years of work in a span of 2 weeks. You think about it, like when you're recruiting your roster, this takes several years to put together what each roster looks like each season. You're doing it in literally like 2 weeks. That's insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like you mentioned, there was, I believe, after he was hired a couple weeks ago, that Friday night, Pete Thamel of ESPN, him and Jeff Borzella, I believe, had kind of released that A&M was expected to have about $7 million in NIL funds for basketball, which is a very good number for a school like Texas A&M, where football reigns king, always will. Basketball will usually be tied with baseball in that aspect, and usually baseball is going to come first or second, and then sometimes first. So in terms of money and how they can prioritize players, that's not a problem. It's like you just said, a lot of players have entered the portal, and we kind of know what kind of player he wants by after getting Jakari Lane. It's like, okay, he's going after some smaller school guys with immense potential who can translate to the big stage. We've seen that with Auburn, where I believe if you looked at their starting five, most of those guys were transfers from small schools. And so that's not a problem. And he can easily do that. There are a ton of those guys out there. It's like you said, time is running out, and there's only going to be so many players you can go after. And I think I wrote the other day that, you got to temper your expectations this season. I get that whenever you hire a new coach, and especially one like Bucky McMillan, who's very exciting on paper, much more exciting than what Buzz Williams brought with Buzzball, and kind of you expected that this is a rebounding defensive team. You're never going to get these high-scoring offenses that are fun to watch, because we all know you and I are millennials, and the generation below us likes basketball more.
I'm on the fence.
You're on the fence. Yeah, I'm 31, so I think you're kind of in that age range. But we watch basketball, I guess, a little differently. It's like they grew up. I mean, I was in college when Steph Curry became a thing, right? And so, they're used to that kind of Steph Curry play. So they want high-scoring basketball. So that's what they believe they're going to get with McMillan. I believe that's what we're going to get with McMillan. And yes, it's going to be exciting. But I would just say that, just let's stay in a realistic zone right now, because while he will get some very good players, he's contending with all 15 other teams in the SEC right now. Yeah. Now, granted, he's not everybody's in complete rebuild like A&M is, but it's just, you're not going to get players that you may know very well, that you're going to get guys that were maybe averaging like 2 to 3 points a game because they were on a loaded bench or they just didn't get seat time. And he's going to get, commitments from those type of guys because they're going to play immediately. And that's just how it works in today's age. So I would say that I think the future is very bright. I do believe that, because I think the hires he made, especially on his staff, bringing in some of the best recruiters out there, this program is in good shape in terms for the next 2 to 3 years. But like you said, you're going to be getting guys who may be 1-year rentals just to get the program off to a good start and get through the 25 season, because then you have to go and you have to recruit throughout the year. And I think if you can just finish out next season with a decent record, kind of maybe surprise some people, you're going to enter a 2026 offense where you're going to have, or offseason where you're going to have more momentum in terms of recruiting the transfer portal. He's going to develop more relationships, and he's going to be seen on the national stage. So, very good players who maybe want to go somewhere else, go after next season, are going to look at Texas A&M a different way.
Yeah, I kind of you look at his first year at Samford, and I feel like if it goes wrong, if it's not a great first season under him, have it kind of look similar to that, where, yeah, maybe the record's not great, but you have a couple flashes of, like, if you looked at that first year, they went, down to the wire with Georgia. They beat Belmont. I think in their first exhibition game, they scored 174 points. And so, like, you saw some signs that you were like, okay, well, there's something here. And then it obviously, turned into, 4 straight 20-win seasons. And so, okay, the team might be 14-20 next year, but what if they sweep Texas? Or what if they, beat Alabama at Alabama? And it's just like, oh my gosh, how did that happen? Sort of thing.
Yeah.
Could they do a couple things like that can inspire confidence, not just among fans and among the program, but on the recruiting trail too? Because this is such a tight window, you're not going to get all the players you want. But if you can inspire confidence year one, you could have kind of that early juice that can propel you and get you some guys where you can say, hey, we beat Alabama this year. Come join us. Hey, we did this year. Come join us. Whereas if it's like an 8-28 year and there's just no positives,
Yeah,
that's kind of hard. That's hard to get out of that. And, obviously A&M will be in a good enough place NIL-wise and resources-wise where they shouldn't be just terrible. The floor of the program should be high enough to where they should be able to get some guys and make them competitive. But, yeah, that first year is critical because can you inspire confidence on the recruiting trail?
Exactly. That's perfectly, that's well said. I mean, you kind of illustrated it perfectly in terms of what strides can you make, because we look back at, I believe it was Buzz Williams' first season, guys like Josh Nebo stood out, right? I kind of look back to that season a lot. And there were certain games where they were just outmanned, right? They just they didn't have enough guys on their roster to really even keep it close with some teams that were just more veteran, were actually competing to make the NCAA tournament. But they always played extremely tough, and they always, would dominate in certain areas. And that's the thing. Like, if you're selling yourself as this offensive coach who's going to score a lot of points, do that. If you lose games because you can't play defense because you just don't have the guys for it, I don't think A&M fans are going to care. I think if you're scoring like 80 to 90 points a game sometimes, and you're keeping it close and you're keeping competitive and you're playing hard, no matter who's on your roster, I think that, and like you said, beating Texas, beating the Alabamas of the world, making those small strides, that are going to make an impact in the offseason, in the transfer portal to build this team. That's all that matters. I'll give Aggie fans credit, as apoplectic as they can be sometimes. They are taking this in with a reality-based look. Is that, look, it is what it is. Buzz Williams obviously wanted to leave this program. It was time to move on anyways, and it was time to go in a younger direction. I think Trev Alberts, and I said this last week, I think he deserves credit because he looked at kind of the analytical hire, and he said, look, I'm not just going to get some guy that I take off a bookshelf that has experience in getting teams the NCAA tournament, and we just want to get back there. No, you want to get farther than the second round. You want to make the Elite Eight for the first time in program history. You want to make those significant leaps for a program that, look, again, I get it. A&M basketball is not a powerhouse. It is not considered a powerhouse, but it can be because the resources are there. The fan support is there, especially the younger fan support is there. So, look, I really don't know what else to say about it besides wait and see, right? Because that's all we can do. We would just have to see how he builds this roster, what it's going to look like. I think by the summer, we can really gauge, okay, is this like you said, 14-win season? Is this a 9-win team? Is this like a 20-win team? I doubt it's going to be the latter. But if we can really talk about it in a more accurate sense by then. But right now, I think he has some irons in the fire from some of the recruiting guys that have told me some stuff, is that he's a good communicator. He's a great recruiter, and it's just going to take time because he's competing with programs that are just better right now. And Auburn is a great example of getting a recent Mississippi State forward who blanking on the last name right now.
Keyshawn Matthews. Yeah.
I believe it's Keyshawn Matthews. Yeah. And when you look at Keyshawn Matthews, I think you and I both watched him a lot. That is an elite forward. That is a guy who's an immediate impact player for you on both ends. And why he chose Auburn, it's not a shock. They're off of a Final Four appearance. They probably should have been in the championship game. That's, Bruce Pearl, all he has to say is, hey, you want to play with the winner? Sure. And you don't have to go that far from home either. That's just how it is. So I also think my last point is I think McMillan's Alabama roots are going to help a lot in recruiting. It's going to help a lot in the portal in the future. He's a native. He obviously won 5 high school championships there. He led Sanford to 99 wins. This is a guy who's going to get it done. It's just win. That's all we have to wait for. So, I think
to interrupt you real quick. I was mixing up Keyshawn Murphy and Cameron Matthews. They have 2 guys that are both like absolute dogs.
Yeah.
Frankly, and I mixed them up. But yeah.
No, you're good, man. I really looked that up after you said it. I was like, oh, okay. It happens. This is part of the world of podcasting.
Yep.
But we're gonna switch to Texas A&M baseball, coming off of a very, very entertaining sweep of South Carolina over the weekend. I personally have not had more fun as a baseball fan watching them Thursday through Saturday. Obviously, Saturday's epic, historical, I don't know what else you can say about it, comeback after being down 12-2, winning 15-12 with consecutive grand slams. First time that's ever happened, I think, in baseball history. I was getting a little mixed up with that because I do know that for A&M, it's since 1974 that they've had that large of a comeback, I believe.
Yeah.
What was the stat?
Since at least 1974. So I think that's as far back as the records go.
Yeah, exactly. As far back as you can say, well, that's when they started taking these stats. Yeah. But starting and it's kind of interesting. Me and Will and Robert Barons were talking about this last week, that the biggest thing that was standing in A&M's way was confidence and pitching. That was it. I mean, I honestly thought you go in the season, this was the consensus preseason #1 team. And the reason for that was your starting pitching and your elite batting lineup, starting with Jace Levelette, who is obviously still considered as the #1 prospect, as Baseball America basically said today, that he's still contending for that #1 spot after improvement. And you go down the list from Caden Sorrell to Wyatt Hensler, to pretty much every transfer portal addition. This was an elite lineup that when they started off so poorly, you just looked at it confused. I mean, it's like, you have predominant strengths like that. You should be able to get through games, especially in SC play. You should be able to at least win series based on offense, even if the pitching is not contributing at a high level. And I think there were moments where, Ryan Prager, for example, would have great outings, and then Justin Lampkin would have average outings. Then Miles Patton would have good to average to poor outings, and the offense just would never give enough. And you were coming out of losses where you looked at that and went, if they just scored 8 runs, this record would be completely different. And after being shut up 10-0, being held hitless against Tennessee, I saw something the other day that, we went into Saturday's doubleheader against Tennessee kind of thinking, okay, this team is officially either quit or it's just not going to get better. And I think it was Terrence Keel's immaculate catch that saved a home run when tied 2-2 that completely turned around this season. For now, we have a lot of games left and we have very tough series left. But that could have been the turning point, because after that, this team scored, I believe it was 26 runs and completely destroyed the then #1 ranked team in the country. And I mean, destroyed them to the point where I believe Ben Royo hit a home run in game 2 and Wyatt Hensler as well, where it was just with ease. It was just with pure swagger and just fun. They were just having fun. They were just beating the living crap out of this very talented championship contending team. And we're all sitting there going, what is this? What is going on here? What happened? Is this real? Is this a fluke? Are we going to go in the week and they're going to struggle against a mid-major, and then we're going to go in against South Carolina and they're just going to get swept? That didn't happen. You go into, I believe it was Tuesday against Sam Houston on the road, didn't even hit a home run. I believe they scored 12 runs. I can't remember the score exactly, but this team started to live up to their preseason potential finally. And then we go into Thursday, where I will say this: Weston Moss is one of my favorite players to ever come through that program right now, based on just his personality alone, because this was a game where A&M started out hot. South Carolina came back. They got enough from Prager, I believe, but he's been struggling as of late. Miles Patton came in with a 7-7 tie. And basically, I would say outside of Caden Sorrell's walk-off, that was the reason A&M got off to such a good start and continued going into game 2, which was a shutout 17-0 run roll win. And then obviously we go into the final game of the series. You go into game 3s all the time, and it's really like, what kind of pitching are we going to get today? Are we going to get kind of lazy? Oh, we won the series, whatever. Well, Miles Patton was very good for, I would say, about 3 innings, maybe 4. Top of the 5th, it just all went to hell. And you started to think, okay, is this the type of A&M team that we're going to see the rest of the season? Is that they win a series and then it's kind of like, okay, do we have to give that much after? I would say I don't think that's the case, but at the same time, you finally saw the perseverance that we all expected, that you are down. South Carolina just ramped the score up. It was 12-2. Blake Binderup hit. I think it was a 2-run home run, and then a couple more runs in the 7th. And then after that, you have 12th man representative Hayden Schott walking up to the plate with bases loaded, looking completely relaxed. And I mean, I honestly saw this as they can't do this. This isn't going to happen. This is a fairy tale, right? It's like they got close enough, but hits just again with ease, just hits a home run, just just having fun. The guy's celebrating already. He knows that they're going to win this game. It's 12-11. Again, you're thinking, no, they're going to get 3 outs, right? It's going to happen. Walk me through, instead of me hogging all the time right now, walk me through kind of their mental aspect going into, I believe, the 7th when they're down 12-7. What do you think was just the turnaround there? What do you really attribute this to, like Michael Early's influence, or was this purely this team figuring out, we are this good, we know what we can do, this is something we can achieve, and we can continue not to pull out these type of wins, but continue to play like this, competitive, and giving ourselves a chance to win throughout the rest of SC play?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a compounding effect of, okay, you not just sweep the doubleheader against Tennessee, but you kill them in the process. You do what you did against South Carolina after I think you had 14 straight retired batters in game 1, and the game ended the way it did. And then you win 17-0 game 2. I mean, just the confidence has to continue to build. And there are tangible reasons behind why it's happening. You insert Caden Sorrell, who's been out for much of the season with a hamstring injury. He's immediately amazing. Bear Harrison has just absolutely caught fire. I mean, you've got guys that are just really starting to – I think that middle of the lineup was such a hole for A&M, and they moved Keel to the leadoff spot probably 7 or 8 games ago, and that's panned out as well. And now you go 1 through 6, and that lineup looks so much more lethal than it did 2 weeks ago. And so I think it was probably more of a building confidence thing where you probably don't have that confidence, you don't have that belief if you don't do what you did at Tennessee, if you don't do what you did in game 1 and game 2. And you could talk about so many guys that proved to be heroes. I mean, even George in game 1 with the home run that he robbed. You talk about Keel, what he did against Tennessee. Just so many different guys showing up, and then that 9th inning, it really was a collaborative deal where it wasn't just a couple guys. They batted around in that inning. The inning started with Kent getting a single, and it ended with him hitting the grand slam. And so it kind of took everybody. And yeah, I think you have to give credit to the coaching. I mean, I think this season has been quite the learning experience for Michael Early. I think there were some real growing pains early on in the season, some questionable decisions, some bad body language. You'd hear him on an interview, and you're like, man, did a puppy just die, or like, what is going on here? Like, hey, as a head coach, you probably shouldn't sound like that on an interview. And I remember that Cal Poly series being there. I think it was the Cal Poly series where I was just like, man, the body language is terrible with this team. They look miserable out there. They look like none of them are friends. They look unhappy, and you could just feel it. It was so different than the year before, where it was just so much collective, connected tissue, right? Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, just you didn't get that sense early on in the year, and they kind of won their first 5 games, and they're beating up some bad teams. But you kind of looked and said, well, Ryan Prager's awesome, and Miles Patton had started really well. Lampkin had a fairly decent start to the season. But the question was kind of like, well, what's going to happen once those guys start to fade? And because the defense is a real issue and the offense is kind of underwhelming. And so once those issues, or once their pitching was not as good as it was to start the year, that's when you started to see the real cracks. And then that's when you really started to see the whole chemistry thing and the I guess the spirit of the team kind of crack. But I think at Tennessee, I think there was almost this back against the wall mixed with the nothing to lose mentality. Like, hey, this is the number 1 team in the country, lost to them in the championship last year, 1-9 in conference play, got to win and got to play free because this is it kind of thing. This is the chance to turn it around. And that was also the series where you really felt that the team started to have fun again. They had the new golden putter. They obviously this past weekend they introduced the green jacket with the Masters.
Caused a lot of controversy with Texas fans, yeah.
Of course. And so it kind of started this new like fun thing, and like you can point back to previous years, the Pringles and the good hats and all the antics that you've seen from this team, and it just felt like they finally had their new thing. They started with Rattling Bog to begin the year. They're still doing it, obviously, but it kind of felt last year what was going to be the thing this year, and now they found it. And I just think, you combine confidence, you combine the positive energy with, having Sorrell and Harrison playing the way that they're playing. So many things at play, and then really maybe the biggest thing is Caden Kent is just a grand slamming clutch machine where if he's at the plate with the bases loaded, you might have to treat him like Barry Bonds and just intentionally walk him.
Yeah. I mean, he's done it now. That was his second 9th inning grand slam in the last 2 years. I mean, that's the thing. Like you look at that and you think Caden Kent, son of Jeff Kent. I just can't get over how that I mean, literally that he's going to get married one day and he's going to have to put son of Jeff Kent like next to it. It's just like trademark now, but he's been the bright spot. And I'm glad you mentioned, obviously, Bear Harrison. We could spend an entire show, I think, talking about this young man's ascendance. And you got to remember, they picked up two catchers in the transfer portal, knowing, look, we gotta find out who our guy is. And he quickly, I think, really the start of SEC play, even when they were struggling, he was really one of the main bright spots. And then Caden Kent really started playing well, and especially defensively. He made some great plays on defense against South Carolina. But these are always going to be the keys, is that when you have to have specific players step up consistently, because we mentioned Jace Levelette, obviously, who's the biggest name on this team outside of Wyatt Hensler, he's still the, I think, active home run leader, I believe. Mm-hmm. But when he's not performing consistently, you need a handful of guys to step up. And I think Ken had, I believe, 4 hits in Game 3 on Saturday. And I would also mention pitching wise, I do know that credit to Michael Early for mentioning that Brad Rudis and Caden McCoy kept that team clean to give them a chance to win that game. And I mean, that was kind of massive. You had a a bullpen that had been struggling. They literally couldn't put a guy in that wouldn't allow a run. And you put in Brad Lourdes, who's been known throughout his career of allowing big home runs, and he kept him clean. And it's like, that's a team effort that you need to see the rest of the season, because we're coming up with number 2 Arkansas, I believe. I think Texas is number 1 now. Was that number 2 this weekend? Obviously in Fayetteville, that's going to be a very, very tough series. But I'm going to be honest, the way this team is playing right now, I wouldn't doubt that they could win 1 or 2 games there. I just don't right now. I mean, 2 weeks ago, no, I would have said no chance, they're going to get swept. But after Arkansas, obviously you're going to face Jim Schlossnagle in Texas. That is going to be widely publicized. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet, but we will be ready for that. And if you go into that with a series win, or I'm going to be honest, even 1 win against Arkansas, you still have a little momentum. You would hope that 1 win, if that's the case, would come in the final day of the weekend. But look, it's just, they're having fun again. It's fun to cover. It's fun to watch this team, because it was very, very, very ugly for the first 2 months. And I'm just grateful for that, to be honest. As somebody who gets paid to cover this team, it's like, they're actually trying. They're doing what we all expected, and they're doing it in a way where they're having fun, and that's all really that matters. That's how you're going to win games. We're going to move on finally to the spring football season, which has been underway for a while. Obviously, Carter, you've done a fantastic job giving us notes from the media practices. The spring game this weekend, like, I've kind of been mulling this over throughout the start of the week of really what we are going to expect to see, and really areas that were weaknesses last year. Are we really going to see any improvement or anything in a spring game? Probably not. But give me the names on both sides of the ball that you believe are going to be players to watch on Saturday during the Maroon and White spring game.
Okay. Well, no one cares about offensive linemen, unfortunately.
I do. I care about offensive
linemen. It's really, really sad to me that no one cares. Honestly, I'll try to go position by position.
We can do that, yeah.
Offensive line, I would say Mark Naboo would be one to watch, just because he's coming off a season-ending injury. Probably expected to be the starter there, going to be competing there with Coley Fayu, the Utah transfer. But can he reclaim that? Can it be just an easy transition off that injury? Demetrius Crownover, another guy, gained like 10 or 15 pounds this offseason. Don't know if that was the right move.
Tackle, yeah. I mean,
yeah, but I think this team under Elko, one of their big focuses is they like to be bigger. They like to get bigger guys on the O-line, and they like to have, they're not the kind that's going to have these ballerinas at tackle that can
dancing bears, yes.
Yeah, dancing bears. And it's going to be more of the bigger types. And so I'm curious to see what he looks like there. Quarterback, obviously Marcel Reed is the guy there. What kind of steps has he made is kind of the question. With him, spring games are hard because they aren't live. You're not, hitting the quarterback. And so you can't see a lot out of him as a runner that's kind of simulates a real game. But I think the real question with him is sort of his deep ball and his accuracy. He was about a 61% completion last year. His goal is to get to 70 this season. So how much more accurate is he? I think in practice, when it comes to just watching him, looks really good from just a short intermediate standpoint, but the deep ball is kind of where you start to see some trouble there. And obviously with pressure in his face, it's even more different. And the numbers tell you that, hey, the deep ball has been kind of the concern with him. So can he push it and get to that next level? Jacob Zeno, first time we'll see him. So that'll obviously be a guy to watch. I think from a running back standpoint, obviously a lot of intrigue with the two freshmen, Tiger Ryden and Jamarian Morrow, but I want to see Reuben Owens and see if he can be someone who could maybe even push Le'Veon Moss. I think Moss is kind of your surefire starter there. There are people out there that are like, oh, no, Owens is just as good. No.
We don't know that.
Le'Veon Moss is the guy there. He will be the starter, assuming he comes off his injury just fine. And so I wouldn't expect anyone to really surpass him. But Colin Klein likes to have a rotation there, likes to involve multiple backs. We saw what Amari Daniels did last year. So I'd like to see what Owens can do. This is kind of a make or break season for him. I think he showed some flashes as a true freshman, but didn't quite, take the mantle. Last year had the setback. So this year, can he prove that maybe, hey, he could be the guy in 2026 after Moss is gone? That'll be my question. And I think this spring game will kind of be the first snapshot. And he's gained some weight this offseason. I think that's been kind of the big thing with him is, hey, can he fight through contact a little bit better? Can he break some tackles? Can he be a between the tackles guy? Again, flashes of it, but he also has gone down pretty easily at times when he has played. Tight end, man, probably the weakest position group last year for A&M. And this year seems to be fairly upgraded. I don't expect Micah Riley to be available for the spring game, but everyone else should be good to go. So you got Nate Borkircher, the Nebraska tight end transfer. You got Amari Nyblack from Texas. I think he's probably your best pass catcher of the group. Theo Mellon-Orstrom obviously had some good games last year, and could he build off that? He's always been kind of viewed as a project, and last year he finally showed like, hey, no, I'm not just a project. There's something here. How much more is in there for him to tap into? I think this group really needs to make a jump, and was quite a liability last year. But I think that they made enough additions to where I think they can be at least serviceable. But I'm really curious to watch Amari Nyblack just because I think what he did 2 years ago to Alabama makes him a pretty intriguing guy. And then lastly, with the offense receiver, another group where not a great group last year. None of your receivers, I believe, had more than 600 yards receiving.
Yeah.
It was the fourth or fifth year in a row they didn't have an 800-yard receiver. It's been a real curse for this program.
Yeah.
And now they've added a guy that has done that. Casey Concepcion, out of NC State, looks to be as advertised. I think he's your number one option this year. And I also think Mario Craver should be a nice number 2 or number 3 option with the speed that he brings. Those guys are going to be the ones to watch from the receiver group. There are other guys in the mix too that, I think some of the younger guys like Isaiah Williams and Ashton Bethel Roman, Terry Bussey, obviously. Those guys I think could make a jump this year. Bussey's kind of missed a lot of the spring with the hamstring injury, so I don't know if we'll see him Saturday. And if we don't, that means the other 2 guys I think could get more play. But Concepcion's the guy to know. I mean, I think that's the guy who will lead you in every category this year. And he's not a big guy, maybe not the fastest, but I think what he can do route running wise, quickness wise, I think he's a guy that can get open quite a bit. Sorry if I'm out of breath.
No, you're good, man. Yeah.
Defense. We want to talk defense too.
So yeah, I was gonna say you're 100% on top of the wide receiver rotation because I think there's been a lot of question marks with that, and I trust me, I was mentioning the progress made by Isaiah Williams and Ashton Bethel Roman, 2 guys who I've loved since they came out. I mean, I just think that if they just make that small jump in terms of route running and really understand the offense, they're going to be 2 names that could give you, a lot of production and a lot of reliability and become a friend to Marcel Reed. Terry Bussey was a name. I remember Will had to correct me and be like, well, Terry Bussey. I was like, well, the reason why I just didn't say Terry Bussey is not because he's not Terry Bussey. We all know how good he is and how good he can be. But like you said, he's been injured. He's been dealing with some issues. And that has allowed these other younger guys to really show, look, we are a much deeper wide receiver rotation than we've been in a while. And when you have a guy like Casey Concepcion who comes in here with his pedigree, who's, I would honestly say, is one of the most versatile athletes they've had in a while. I believe he had, I have to think, like 400 yards rushing a couple of years back.
Yep.
I mean, he was utilized in so many ways, and not that they're going to be, putting him at running back. Let's be honest, he's too valuable. But
Yeah.
but this is a guy, like you said, is going to lead you in pretty much every category. And yes, they are coming back. And we did an article last week regarding Noah Thomas and him leaving for Georgia. And credit to him, it wasn't their usual that we've gotten from Evan Stewart of kind of talking about A&M in a negative light of how they didn't use me correctly. He just basically said, well, they don't have a guy like me. So, they needed one. This was an open opportunity. I hope I can thrive with Georgia. At the same time, you kind of equate that with A&M. There's not a lot of size, right? And that's why what you said with the tight ends this season, having a guy like Amari Niblack and Theo making that jump. We all do remember him dropping that pass against Auburn in the quadruple overtime game. Those type of plays are so important to winning games. As Jimbo Fisher used to say, the inches, right? That is the definition of getting the inches, right? And you got to make those plays. And having a guy like Niblack, who I do remember, I believe it was against Texas, where he made a couple big plays, showed off his elite athleticism. He just wasn't utilized with Texas. I think they wanted him to be a blocker mainly. Guy didn't want to really learn, and look, he's going to have to learn how to inline block a little bit. But I think that Colin Klein is smart enough to know this is a receiver. This is a guy we're going to get out in space and give Marcel a big target. Overall, I agree with you. I would talk about O-line all day. It's my favorite position to scout and watch, but I know that's not as sexy as some people would say it is. But I do agree with you that it is a little confusing why Crownover is gaining so much weight at tackle. But like you said, it has to do with the run game. It has to do with mauling guys and, creating those holes for Le'Veon Moss and Reuben Owens. And like, that's just, I thought Crownover was always pretty big. I didn't know why you need to add extra weight, but c'est la vie. But it's a position where I don't have any qualms. I do believe that they are going to be one of the better O-lines, and I think that's just going to make this entire offense move better. And I think that's just going to help Marcel develop and finally, I don't think he's going to, hit 70% of his passes. I don't know. I mean, look, I love that they have lofty goals. I really do. And, SEC Media Days is going to be fun as usual when you hear all these players talking about their extremely lofty goals. And it's always a fun time. But, it is good that he's determined to improve. And he knows what he failed at last season. I guarantee, like most of the national people who don't cover this team extensively like you and I do, they're pretty much basing his career off of the Texas game, which is extremely unfair. And I've seen a lot of people not mention Marcel as like a rising player. That is one game against an elite secondary. I just don't think I'm not going to be out there talking about him like in cheerleading for him, but be fair. Like he was in a bad situation last year. He struggled like any quarterback does. And I do have faith that at least in some areas, he's going to improve. Maybe significantly, maybe much marginally, but it's just going to make A&M's offense better. Defensively, I do think, obviously, you and I both know A&M has some defensive line depth issues, especially in the interior. Obviously, DJ Hicks, who spoke last week, is very determined to live up to his 5-star potential. We all remember that this was the number 1 rated defensive lineman in the 23 class. I remember Oklahoma boosters were probably crying after he committed to A&M. He was just that good. And, we haven't seen much. He's been in a loaded rotation. Obviously, he had last season was pretty average for him in his first really starting season. And look, he's the guy now with Albert Regis. Him and Albert are the guys they are going to be dependent on to stop the run, get some pressure inside, and help guys like Cassius Howell, Rylan Kennedy, and the 4 transfer portal additions rush the passer. But there is some depth issues. Tyler Onyema, I always screw his name up, from Iowa State. very versatile. Obviously, DJ Hicks praised him and said this is one of our most versatile guys. You can really line him up anywhere. That's just one piece. And I know that head coach Mike Elko did kind of discuss, like, well, if we need to add guys, we'll add guys. It's just we can't really expect anything because he's the head coach. He knows what he really needs. They're probably discussing this on a daily basis of, do we have enough inside, especially in SEC play? I don't know if you have any updates on that or not. But what do you really know if they have a plan going forward with addressing the D-line depth issues?
I think it'll be something that they look into. I just think that defensive tackles are so hard to find in the portal that are good. I mean, you're talking about one of the more premium, they do not grow on trees. And when a good one becomes available, you're talking about a crazy, crazy bidding war. And so unless you're getting somebody that, like, you think of Nick Scorton, like he had the A&M connection being from Bryan, and like, there was some interest there. Elko kind of knew about him. So I think it made a lot of sense. But unless that happens, I mean, you've really got to outbid everybody for a really good one. I think maybe you try to get one or two guys there that maybe they're not all conference players, but they at least give you depth. I think, you've got three guys there that you feel really good about. I guess good enough about. Regis, probably not an all-conference player, but what broke out last season was really good. A lot of games under his belt, and you feel good about him as a starter caliber player. DJ Hicks, we don't really know yet. He's gained some weight in a good way. I think he's put some size on that was needed. I think he's got some experience now. Can he step into, I think Onyedem could be the starter there. Maybe that's a rotation. We'll see. Kind of depends on how they want to use Onyedem. But those three are kind of the guys there. And then it's like, okay, is Dellen Evans the next guy? Is it Jaden Scarlett? Could DJ Sanders, the highly touted true freshman, step in to a backup role? It's tough. You don't have a lot of snaps there among those back end guys. You lost some depth there with Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy leaving. You lost Samu Tau Manu Pepe. I said it correctly. And so, when you lose some of those guys, it may not seem like a big deal at the time, but then you kind of look and you're like, oh man, all the options here are either guys who've never played or they're true freshmen. So I think you definitely have to get a guy or two there. It's just how good can you get them without getting in a crazy bidding war. You're also maxed out on your scholarship space for now. Right now, based on my count unofficially, A&M has a scholarship count of 88 players entering the portal. And so obviously you're going to have some natural attrition. You're going to have guys that enter the portal. You could have some medical retirements or guys quitting football. You see that happen all the time. Guys just – I remember Jalen Preston was just like, nope, I'm not playing football anymore.
Yeah.
Bobby Taylor, nope, I'm not playing. Guys that will medically retire. It'll happen. And so I don't know if space is a concern, but you're probably not going to get 12 guys. You're probably not going to get – you got 13 guys in the winter cycle. I would imagine – the most you get is about half of that in this spring cycle. We'll see. I'm sure this is a time where if you're a backup, you're kind of done. You're like, if you're a backup and you're not going to play, if you have some idea, if you're a guy, there's a couple guys that switch positions mid-spring. Do they want to play that position, or are they like, man, that was a last resort move and I'm still a 15 guy. I'm going to the portal. So all things worth watching. But, I came out with a transfer portal need ranking, and I put defensive tackle at number one. That's the biggest need. I think receiver is number two. I think those are really the two they got to get these. Receiver, you touched on it a second ago, but it's more of it's not that they are short of good receivers or promising receivers.
It's a type, right? It's a type. They've gotten smaller and
You
faster.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, like if you're trying to make a cake and all you've got are 3 ingredients and not the fourth, like you got to get the fourth ingredient, right, to make the cake, or else you're not going
It's
to
gonna
have
be
a
a
cake.
sloppy cake.
Yeah, like it's going to be a bad birthday, right? And
Yeah.
so they need to get that towering guy, not just for, hey, we're in the red zone, let's throw it up to this guy. Hey, we 50-50 situation, let's get it to him. But also, hey, can you have someone who can block on the outside? Can you have somebody, if your guy blocking on the outside is Mario Craver standing at 160 pounds, that's not a good spot to be in. And you might say, it's just receivers blocking, but it really does.
No, it matters. Yeah, that's the funny joke about it. Is like people always say, well, they're gonna. Remember the old joke with Jimbo Fisher was always, oh well, you better learn how to block. I'm like, did you ever play football? You know how important it is for wide receivers to block, especially in the run game. I don't think they know that. I think they just, they play a lot of Madden and they just see, receivers flying around all the time. Like, okay, well, it is an issue, and I do believe that in terms of getting players in the transfer portal, wide receiver might be more attainable at this point. Because like you said, I've kind of looked, and there's obviously going to be more players coming out, just kind of random backups and guys you may have never heard of for defensive line. But like you said, it's going to be a bidding war with all the big schools that have the same problems. And like we've seen every season, every team has a weakness, right? Every team has a weakness at some position going into the season. No team is perfect. And, I'll use Texas as an example. They're going to be the team everybody looks at. And they lost a lot of players to the upcoming NFL draft. And nobody really wants to talk about that. And yes, they have a lot of talent behind them. But at the same time, it's young talent. It's talent you can't really rely on. And they're going to get the benefit of the doubt because they're probably going to be a top 5 team going into the season, while A&M is probably going to be a bottom 20 type of team. And you and I are talking about their depth issues at defensive line, but I wouldn't say that a lot of national people are looking at their depth issues at defensive line. They're kind of looking at the premium positions, because that's what's going to hurt A&M in the middle of the season. When you don't have guys you can put out there for so many snaps, and you don't have reliable guys when a team starts running the ball on you, and you don't have anybody that can really stop it unless you just start really mixing it up. And that's really what's going to hurt them. I don't, again, like you said, it's a little early, but it is getting late, and we will know if this is going to be addressed sooner than later. But I like to finish with the secondary. Obviously, this is an area where the bowl loss to USC saw Des Ricks, who was a redshirt freshman last year, transferred from Alabama, have one of the worst showings at corner I've personally seen, especially in an A&M uniform. And outside of Will Lee, and a couple other guys, this unit was, I'd say, average to above average. Obviously, the safety play was up and down. Losing guys like Damani Richardson, losing that type of leadership did hurt them, and it was going to take some time to get back to the middle. I think that is an area, especially at cornerback, where a lot of fans are a little bit confused with what they have. They know that, obviously, and you mentioned in your notes last week that Tyreek Chappelle is looking healthier. I think you and Tony Catalina did a really good job of kind of showing that he looks 100% healthy. Like, he looks ready to go, which is a good sign for them. Obviously, Willie is going to be your number one guy and probably your most reliable guy. And really after that, outside of Julian Humphrey, who's another name, obviously coming from Georgia, it's a little muddled, right? It's a little bit like, how much do they actually have in terms of reliability of guys you can count on to come in? And, I just want you can shed some light on that, because I think a lot of fans are a little confused on what's behind those key guys.
Yeah, and listen, most teams in the country have this problem. Cornerbacks are so good. Cornerbacks are hard to come by.
Oh, yeah.
So if you have one all-conference guy, sometimes that's good enough. You just need the other guy to not be bad. And unfortunately for A&M, that's not the case last year. I think that, with Des Ricks, I think a lot of his issues were not, hey, this guy's faster or more athletic. A lot of it was between the ears, as far as like, what coverage am I running? When do I pass him off to the safety? That when is the safety going to help? Kind of, you just saw so many miscommunications between him and the safety last year, where it'd be a blown coverage and it'd be like, how the heck did that guy get wide open? Mm-hmm. It wasn't like he was just getting absolutely toasted up and down the field like he was Josh DeBerry, right? Sorry, Josh DeBerry, for this. He was a 5-star recruit for a reason. The guy is a good athlete. He is a long corner. He's got the physical traits you'd want. He's got to learn how to play the position. And I think for A&M last year, did they want to throw Des Ricks in there as a redshirt freshman? No, but you got to think about this. Like what A&M inherited cornerback-wise was absolutely abysmal. You talk about what Bucky McMillan had to do. That's basically what Mike Elko had to do at cornerback. And, so the fact that they were able to get Will Lee, who actually was their first commitment, pretty impressive. So I think from that standpoint, they just need the other guy to be decent. And I think Julian Humphrey is someone to watch because at Georgia, which, is kind of the standard, right, for defense and just for, teams, right? Like they're consistently one of the best teams.
Yeah.
And he was able to become a starter pretty early on in his career, lost the starting job middle of last year. And it's a famous highlight. Everyone's seen it, of Ryan Williams making that crazy catch against Georgia. That was against Julian Humphrey. And
yeah,
you can't really fault Julian Humphrey there because Ryan Williams is making a crazy play. But it kind of showed what he struggles with, which is kind of turning his head around, making a play on the ball. He can stick with a guy. He can, he has the traits to stick with guys. It's just finishing plays is where he really, really struggles. And so, as he gets another year another year of experience and a new system, is that something that he can kind of develop? If you just have one thing you got to work on, can that help? Des Ricks, similar, right? Like he's got the makings. It's just, can he learn it? And you added a new guy, coaching-wise, Lyle Hemphill in the back end, that I think his sole purpose is to help guys like Des Ricks, square things away schematically. And so, you mentioned some of the other guys that could be in the mix there. Javon Thomas is somebody who obviously brings some starting experience. I think he's similarly, he's dealt with some injuries, and he's similarly thrust into a situation where he played a lot earlier than he should have. He got thrust into the Miami game in 2023 and gave up a really big play, and it was just like, yeah, you shouldn't be putting in a true freshman in that situation. Last year, redshirt, or I can't remember if he's redshirt or not, but he was hurt for most of last year. Yeah. And so now that he's healthy, now that he's 2 years in, he showed enough to where he could see the field early. He just wasn't ready and was dealing with injuries. Now that he's healthy, can he put that together? So you got 3 guys there that have experience, that are a few years into college now. And again, you're just looking for somebody that's at least serviceable, someone who's not going to get burned, someone that's not going to blow coverages. I think having a guy like Will Lee on the other side should help you. Probably means you're going to get picked on more. It probably means you're going to get targeted more. But it also means you have more opportunities to get picks and to make plays. And so, yeah, it's those 3 guys to watch. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, it's again, like you said, it's a premium position. We see, I think A&M just kind of gets, pointed out more than anybody because they did allow some big plays last year, and obviously Rick's kind of ending the season the way he did. I really don't think it's fair, because I agree with you. I think he's extremely talented, and I think this was a lot of this was technical aspects of the position, learning him. Humphill is a guy who can really fix that. I do believe that is one of the reasons he had became an assistant, why he came to A&M. He knows that I've worked with guys like this who just haven't mastered the position yet of just playing it correctly, because there is a difference of he's a great athlete, but like you said, doesn't turn his head. He's going to get burned by guys who are just a tad bit quicker than he is. And so, again, it's a position that I'm not extremely worried about, but because of their history and because we just know that, look, there are going to be teams in the SEC that can burn you and will burn you. So you just hope that they can learn enough this offseason, this spring, going into fall, and he has a group that he does trust enough, right? Because you went into last season really not knowing we had a guy like BJ Mays, who I really do hope he has at least a pretty decent NFL career. He really probably helped himself make some money by the way he played at the end of the season. He was really A&M's best corner outside of Will Lee, but you don't have a guy like that this season. You hope it can be like a Julian Humphrey while you brought him in. He's at least a veteran. He's played enough SEC football, right? You think like he's played a lot of college football overall, so he's going to be that other guy that can pair with Lee, and you don't have to worry about those two. It's just everybody else you hope don't burn you, right? Lastly, the safety position. I think that you have guys like Marcus Ratcliffe, obviously Brooks, and others who could end up being very, very, very good, or, guys who could kill you in the run game and make a lot of mistakes. We've seen some issues last season where late hits and just boneheaded mistakes were a big problem, especially early in the season. Really, to finish this off, where do you see this rotation? What do you see it looking like? Is this going to be a strength for A&M, or kind of one of those areas we'll kind of wait and see?
I think it's a weakness until they finally put it all together.
Yeah.
All three of those guys, I mean, Bryce Anderson, 3 straight years, it was, man, this guy's got potential, but is it ever going to click for him?
Yeah, and he's a guy, just to interlude, he's a guy who I would honestly say he had his worst season last season. So it's one of those things where, he's got to improve during his final year.
Dalton Brooks, the same thing. Marcus Ratcliffe, wouldn't say it was a great season for him either. I would still expect Anderson and Brooks to be the top 2 guys there. Miles Davis is somebody that, has shown flashes in the spring. Maybe he gets into the mix. But as far as the collective group, I think what they really struggled at last year was tackling. I mean, how many times did they fail to wrap up?
Mm-hmm.
Did guys just go right past them? It was a real weakness for that team, and it's why I think there were so many explosive runs against this group. And you also had the blown coverages. It just kind of became, what is this group good at? And Ratcliffe had a few picks early on, so you thought, hey, maybe you got something here, and then he just kind of faded off. And I think maybe the reason for optimism is a couple things. One, I think you could talk yourself into Bryce Anderson as a resurgent year because a couple things. One, he was hurt all of last year, and not a lot of people know just how bad it was, but he played through an AC joint sprain in his shoulder, which, pretty gnarly to play through if you're tackling guys and wrapping up. Very hard to tackle. So it kind of makes sense that he wasn't able to do it. Also was his first year moving from nickel to safety. So that was an adjustment. And then obviously first-year head coach, Mike Elko, first, new system, right? So in high school, he wasn't, some full-time defensive guy. So it's not like he's been playing safety for 15 years. This is all very new to him. Well, he's healthy now. This is his second year in the system, second year at safety. He's got the athletic traits. I mean, the guy is a good athlete. And so maybe this is the year it comes together. Dalton Brooks, also great athlete. It's not like, I think you can look at certain guys and say, well, there's not much more he can do because he runs a 8.4 40-yard dash, right?
Yeah.
That's not these two guys.
He's tapped out his athletic potential, yeah.
Right. These guys have the potential. It's just they got to kind of put it together. And again, I keep talking about Lyle Hemphill. His addition, can they nail down sort of the schematic things that, hey, can you embrace the things that they're good at? Can you, I was talking to, I think it was Jay Bateman. It might have been Elko. I'm mixing them up, but one of them said, I asked about kind of the run defense issues, and their thought was, well, it's not that like A&M's just built to be bad against the run. It's that they were giving up really, really good players were getting open in wide spaces. And so, yeah, of course you're not going to tackle Jeremiah Love when he's one-on-one isolated with Torian York, who's just not the athlete that Jeremiah Love is. And it's one-on-one, and all Jeremiah Love's got to do is make one little juke, and boom, he's gone, right? Like, hey, that's not Torian York's fault for not making that play. It's maybe the defensive line's fault for letting him get into such an area where he's one-on-one with your middle linebacker. Yeah. So there's some things structurally that I think this defense could clean up where, hey, those things aren't allowed, And so it's all three levels, but so I think the safeties maybe at times, they're bad tackling, but maybe that's also because they're in those short area spaces where it's one-on-one. So if they can shore up the things in front of them, maybe that also will help them to take a step forward.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And we didn't obviously mention the linebackers, because I do think that if you do have clean safety play and you have clean enough defensive line play, you've got obviously Torian York, who I think is going to have his best season yet. I really do think he's going to take that big jump. And Scooby Williams, who, well, if we're talking about fixing those issues, he completely fixed those issues he had at Florida last year. And so you're talking about guys like Bryce Anderson and others. If they take that same route, then we're talking about a very good safety rotation. I mean, that's the thing. It's all there. It's just put it together for a final season for a couple of you guys. And for a defense that, look, you need to be, because of what we talked about with the defensive line, you may need to be even better because of those depth issues. So that's on them. Lyle Hemphill, we will be talking about him a lot, I think, going into fall, and his name's going to start popping up because basically those little tweaks that we're going to see from some of these players, especially on defense, you can attribute that to his coaching, and that's going to be big. I'm going to let you go, Carter. Loved having you here. Got a lot of good info, good discussion. We have obviously the spring game coming up on Saturday. We don't know what the future is for A&M with the spring game, but they're having one. And if you're not going to it, you can watch it on SEC Network Plus streaming. And really after that, obviously Texas A&M baseball plays at Arkansas this weekend, starting on Thursday through Saturday. So a lot of stuff going on with Texas A&M sports everywhere. Obviously, want to give a shout out to the women's softball team that is number one consensus, ESPN, Softball America, I believe. They've done a brilliant job this season. Trisha Ford has been fantastic. And as always, gig 'em as usual. And I will see you guys next Tuesday. Hopefully my co-host Will Stone will be back. We will have Carter back on the show very, very soon to discuss most likely, where this team is headed as we kind of learn more going through the next couple of months, and close into SC Media Days that A&M will be speaking. I think that was confirmed today on Thursday, July 17th. I think Elko is going to be the final man at the podium, which how ironic is that? He'll all that hype, all that Nico drama and all that, he'll get to go in there as a final guy and people will actually listen, which is nice. But thank you guys for listening. As always, like I said, we will be back next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Time, and I will see you guys then.